guys. Today we are talking about thinking before you vote. And as you know, we're all in this heavy election season, which means that we're getting bombarded with information. And I wanted to talk about some of the things you might be seeing online, and maybe you don't know how to think through it. Maybe you don't know what to think about it, and you don't know where to start. I have. And of course, if you listen to me long enough, you recognize Kathy. You probably follow her and listen to her yourself. And if you don't, I highly recommend that you do that. She is the host of the Filter It Through a Brain Cell podcast. Because I've had her on multiple times and I've read her bio and things like that, I just want her to say who she is and what she does. So Kathy, can you just let us know? First of all, thanks for coming on again. I think this is your third time. You're eking up there with Laura Powell from Women in Apologetics. And that's a good one to be like, with.
It
And even
is.
Albert, the editor, who's been on multiple times.
Um,
But at the same time, you're an expert to me in this. Like I told you, you have more experience in logic than I do. And if we're going to tackle big things like this, I want the pro. So thanks for coming back on.
Thank you, Shanda, for having me. No, I appreciate this. And yeah, so who I am just a homeschool mom who was going through the seventh grade with my daughter in the 2019-2020 year. And of course, we all know what happened that year with COVID and the election. And we had read this book about logical fallacies. And I noticed my daughter being able to just having a few skills on how to think and on some critical thinking. She was able to pick up on all the craziness that was happening during that year. And I thought, oh my goodness, if more people in this country had this skill, we would not be in the place that we are right now. So I started the podcast. I teach critical thinking to parents and their teenagers, short little episodes so they can hit play and learn together. And it's taken off, which gives me hope for this next generation that they care about the truth and they want to know how to think and how to think well about what they're seeing. So wow, you picked a doozy of a topic today, and I'm excited to dive in with you.
Yeah, I subscribe to your I'm on your subscriber list, and I get those crazy thinkers emails or
Yeah.
like, what's up crazy thinkers?
Yeah.
And I love that you had posted a couple weeks ago. Just I've seen these, these fallacies in during this election season. If you guys want to be able to identify them, like this is what I have to offer, which by the way, if you're listening, go subscribe. And I was like, Kathy, you know what I'm going to ask you. We have to do a podcast on this because I really, and I did a podcast episode on why Christians should vote, like why we ought to vote, take that privilege and that opportunity that we have as Americans. But now it's like, how do I think about voting? And that's why I wanted you to come on. So you made a great point on your social media. I think it was last week. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was so good. When you're like, guys, that wasn't a debate. And I saw it on Instagram, and then I saw the reaction you were getting from your followers on Facebook. And people were like, that's right. It wasn't a debate. Like
Yeah.
almost surprised, but at the same time, you jogged something. Like you just sparked something in their brains to make them realize that wasn't a debate. They're calling it a debate, but it wasn't. And I love that. So I want you to tell us, first of all, if anybody did watch the presidential debate a couple weeks ago, what they actually saw. And if you didn't, you probably saw clips of it, I'm
Yeah.
sure, on social media. So walk us through that.
Yeah, that was such an interesting, man. I got such different responses on Facebook versus on Instagram. On Instagram, it kind of went viral. Well, viral for me because I don't have a big account on Instagram. And there's just been some craziness that's been happening in the comments over there. So that might be a really good thing to hit on as well. But let's go back to the debate itself. Even just a couple years ago, 5 years ago, I would have thought that was a debate. What I saw in political election debates, and now I use that word with air quotes because they're not debates. I thought that's what it was. I thought it was two people stand up there, answer questions, razz each other, go back and forth, and the public decides who wins, and it just is kind of an embarrassing thing, but this is what we do, and so this must be what a debate is, right? They stand up and argue and call each other names. Well, when my daughter got into ninth grade, she actually had to learn debate, like speech and debate. It's a real thing. I never did this when I was coming up through school. So it was something that I had to learn too. And I realized, oh my goodness, this is not at all what we're seeing on TV. Like a real debate, what happens in a real debate is totally different than what we're seeing. And so I thought, let me make a post just talking about the event itself, because this is something that as a society, why we are still doing it, I don't know. I feel like we need to call it something else or make it be something else. Back in the day, it used to be the way that that people could even hear what the candidates thought and believed, because we didn't have social media. We didn't have all the, YouTubes and videos, and people could send out videos to all their followers. We didn't have that. So it was one place, it was an organized thing where you could hear from the different candidates and kind of contrast and compare. Well, now it has devolved into something completely different. So I gave 6 reasons that it wasn't an actual debate. And my whole purpose for doing this was so that people could understand what they're seeing. Like,
Mhm.
if you can understand what you're seeing, you can put it in context and you can make sense of it a little bit more, versus really thinking that something was happening here that wasn't happening here. And so it was my way of saying, hey, here's what actually happens in a real debate, so they can think through, oh, these are the things that are kind of, you know, just cray cray in
Yeah.
that whole event. So if you want, I can go through the 6 just real quickly
Oh,
and kind of
sure,
give our
sure.
listeners just a
Absolutely.
feel. Okay. So number one reason, it's not a real debate if both sides don't understand and cannot articulate the other person's side accurately. One of the first things you do when you go into debate, like if you're going to uh, compete in a debate tournament, is you're given a question, you're given a resolution, and you have to first study all the affirmative and study the negative, because you don't know which side you are going to be called on to argue. You might have to argue for the affirmative, you might have to argue for the negative. And it's genius, because what this does is it forces you to understand both sides of the argument. If you don't understand both sides of the argument, how can you defend against it? How
Mm,
can you speak to it? How can you accurately say, oh, no, this is what they believe? Because what I've noticed is a lot of times we think we know what somebody else thinks and believes and their motives for doing it, and we don't always have it right. In
yeah.
fact, a lot of times we have it really, really wrong. So that's number one. You have to actually know both sides, in to the point that you could argue for it convincingly, even if you disagree with it, which is kind of crazy. Most Americans can't even imagine being able to do that. Okay, number two, in a real debate, personality issues and petty personal grudges are not the point. Ad hominem attacks are not arguments. So, all these little jabs at the other person and the eye rolls and all that is so unprofessional. Like, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing just to watch to watch grown adults doing this kind of thing. So, anyways, in a real debate, you argue the issues, you don't attack the person. Okay, number three, there should be no interruptions. In a debate, there is equal time allotted to both sides, and it is broken down into like 8 minutes or 5 minutes or 4, whatever. And when you have the floor, you have the floor, and the other person shouldn't be interrupting or making little comments or whatever. And when you don't have the floor, you're done. And now the other person has the time. So you have an allotted time to make your point, and then it's the other person's turn, right? So there's none of this interruptions. Again, it's just rude and it looks ridiculous. Number four, in a real debate, the winner is determined by the judges, right? And it's granted to the person who actually makes the best arguments and provides convincing solutions to the problem at hand. So what we see in society now, obviously there's no judges. We don't have judges at the debates that we have. We have moderators who are supposed to just kind of keep things going, and they're supposed to be impartial, but that's just kind of how it is. So now, who's determines the winners of the presidential debates that we're seeing? It's just up to the people. And the thing that I learned in debate is you had to be trained on how to be a judge. Like, there was very specific things that they told you, this is what you're looking for, this is what you're listening for. They have to make these arguments, they have to have these certain things, or else they don't make a case. They did not make a good case, whether they were a really good speaker or whether or not you really liked them in their presentation. And so now it's all up to the court of public opinion, who we just don't have any training in what we're looking for. And so what do we look for? Who had the best one liner? Who had the best zing of the night, right? Who
Mhm.
looked the most composed? That's how we're judging it on, not even on how are they making their arguments, which is kind of crazy. Number five, in a real debate, you purposely bring in impartial judges who have not made up their mind on a particular topic and are willing to be convinced by good arguments. Again, going back to my last point, are we as the American people coming in to these events being willing to be convinced, or have we already decided and we're just kind of coming in with our popcorn like it's a boxing match? Because I feel like that's the environment and that's the attitude that most people have coming into it. And then lastly, in a real debate, you have to have legitimate source documentation for your claims, and you have to be able to provide that source if or when you are asked. So in other words, you can't just say stuff. You can't just say stuff because it sounds good or because you think it's going to help your case. In what we see on TV, there's little or no accountability for flat out lies. Now I know that they did some misinformation or fact checking, but it wasn't equally applied. And even some of the fact checking has shown to not be true. So it's just kind of crazy. It's just kind of crazy. And so this is the thing that I was just trying to communicate is look, you have to understand what you're seeing. Put it in context. It's not a real debate. You're not actually seeing a true representation of the issues at hand. And the way most people are even coming to this is not going to get them the outcome that they're thinking. So political theater, I don't know what it is. I feel like we need to give it a new name, but we have to understand this about debates and about what we're seeing.
Yeah. What was your difference that you saw on Facebook versus Instagram?
Oh my goodness. So on Instagram, on Facebook, the majority of people are like, wow, you're right, 100%. That makes sense to me. I get it. And then on Instagram, the algorithm kicked in, which we're going to talk about here when we get to question number 2 that you had given me. What I saw over and over again was people were coming in with their assumption of what I was talking about. Cause I was not there to talk about the candidates. I wasn't coming to say, oh, I think Trump won, or I think Kamala won, it wasn't about that. I was trying to educate on the debate. Well, they come into the comments already thinking or assuming what I was saying from both sides. And then because they were all emotional about it, they were attacking me because they thought I was for their candidate or against their candidate or whatever. And I was like, this is so interesting. These
Mhm.
people are losing their minds based on an assumption that they brought with them
Right.
to my reel. And which brings up part of the problem that we have as a whole when it comes to elections in this country.
Yeah, I get that sometimes with other topics. And what I say is go back and watch the reel. Listen carefully and watch the
Right.
reel. Like I have no
Yes.
problems redirecting them because it's like if you're focusing in on something that I did not say, then you need to go back and watch it because I'm not
Right.
gonna I'm not gonna get off on a little tangent with you about this. But yeah, and to me, I've obviously I shared that from Instagram and I didn't think anything about there was no mention of
No,
your this one did better than that one or anything like
no.
that. It was just like you did not watch a debate. Here's the standards of a debate. And if you're being told you're watching a debate, understand why it's not one. And
Right.
so that was obvious. But yeah, I totally get that. That's I get people like that too when you're like, what? Where
Yeah.
did that come from?
Where did it come
But
from?
from my assessment, just watching and listening and seeing about what people post the Americans are happy. Even people, professional journalists are happy with these, dropping these one-liners. One of them that stuck out to me from the debate was, you know, Trump had said, she doesn't even have any policy. She's actually copied some of what Joe Biden put on his website or what he said. And it's as simple as C spot run, and my first reaction was it makes you laugh because you're like C spot run. And at the same time, it is very unprofessional you're like, is this really happening right now? Like, and then you're like, who's watching or any other countries watching us? Like, I hope they're not
Mhm.
watching. But why do you think that we don't have greater expectations for our candidates for these debates because I think that would also be a factor in why we're seeing what we're seeing. Um, why don't we say, wait a second, I need policies here. I need some reasons why you would be the best fit to run the greatest country, the most powerful country on the face of the earth. What is our acceptance of debate outcomes like what we've seen recently say of how we think?
Shanda, you asked the $1,000,000 question. I was like, oh, this is such a good question. And this is the crux of why we're at where we're at as a country. So I wrote down 6 things. 6 seems to be my number here today, but I wrote down 6 things of why I feel like we're here, and yeah, and kind of what's happening, at least as it makes sense to me. This is not an exhaustive list. There are probably others that people would say, but here's some of the things that I see. So number one, what we value as a society has changed. It would seem, so if you can look at what we're being given and what we're, I don't know, venerating and worshiping and seeing as, okay, we have it because we value it, or we're told we should value it. And it would seem that we value, or we're told that we should value winning or tribalism or identity, which, right, that comes from a whole worldview behind it, and emotions more than truth and actual outcomes. So our whole values as a society, and I believe it's part of being in postmodernism. It's the postmodern worldview. It's relativism being played out, that we value identity and winning way more than we do the truth and actual outcomes of policies and seeing things play out and how they affect us all. Number two, we have to be keenly aware of the role that our manipulated online experiences are playing. Okay, social media is it's a whole phenomenon that has come, just in the last couple decades, right? And I don't think, unless you have actually kind of done some diving in and studying the effects that social media has had on us as a society, I don't think we even understand how much it affects us and how much it is manipulating us. And we know it's not even a conspiracy theory that social media is manipulating us. We know, if there's any parents out there, if you're on social media, especially if you're a parent and you've got teenagers, kids, you need to watch the documentary, The Social Dilemma. We just watched this again recently, and oh my goodness, it is the people that make the algorithms for social media talking and telling you how they create those algorithms so that they can keep you on longer, so that they can keep your attention. We have to realize, when it comes to social media, us and our attention are the product. We are the product that is being sold. And so they will create an environment to do anything to keep you there longer. Well, what keeps you there longer? Giving you things that you like, that you agree with. They show you more of what you agree. So I don't know if you've ever wondered, I have wondered this, of how two different people can come to the same event, can watch the same thing happen, and come away with two very different perspectives of what it was, what it meant, what happened, and why. Well, it's because we have biases. And what happens is the algorithms are trained to pick up on your biases, and they will show you more of that. So it is trained to show you more of what you already think, more of what you already believe, and more of what you already like. So this is why, like, I have been so many times over the past 5-ish years, I have been so shocked. How can they think that? How can they not know? Well, it's because they're not being shown it. There are things that people are not seeing at all on their social media because the algorithm doesn't think they want to see it, and maybe they don't want to see it, so they don't see it. Whereas I'm seeing a whole bunch of it. And to me, I'm thinking, well, this is everywhere. This is obvious. Who could not believe this? Because it's being shown to me, and it's not being shown to them. And they're thinking the same thing about, right? This is where we are as a society. And we have to understand this. We have to understand, oh my goodness, there is a whole nother force. And I don't mean that in a weird spiritual way. I just mean this algorithm at play. And we have Senate testimony that it has been manipulated. We know this, right? It is a thing now. So that's a number two to why we're seeing what we're seeing, and kind of how we got to this place. Okay, number three, we have been trained to be lazy when it comes to actually looking things up. And, why should we do the work of a quote unquote fact checker if they're going to do it for us? Right.
Mhm.
And we've been trained to be lazy in our thinking. So if somebody can't sum up something in a 15-second TikTok video, we don't have the mental fortitude or the patience to dig in any further. And so we truly in our society have been dumbed down. We don't have the attention span, and we don't do the work to compare what somebody's saying with, okay, well, did they actually vote that way? So they say this, but is that actually true? You got to dig a little bit. You got to dig in and see. And does it match up with what they end up doing so that we can hold them accountable? Well, our because of social media, our feed scrolls so quickly that we forget what happened yesterday because there's something new. There's always something new. And so there's no accountability, and we don't have the attention spans to go back and look at it. And plus there's too much. It's too much. It's too overwhelming. So that's another reason I feel like why we're at where we're at. All of these things confirm our biases, which reinforce our own rightness, right? Without the need for a good argument. So we just assume because we're being fed confirmation, oh no, what you think is right. What you think, of course, is true. So we don't actually do the work to see, well, is it actually? Is it like, is there more to it? We just don't do the work. We've just gotten lazy. Okay. Number 5 and 6 go closely together. Number 5 is we don't understand government anymore, right? The government that we have now is so far from what it was originally designed to be in this country that it's almost unrecognizable. They're supposed to represent us. They're supposed to go and do what we tell them to. They're not supposed to come and tell us what we're going to do or get in there and then just do whatever the heck they want, right? So our form of government, we don't even understand it. And part of the reason we don't understand it is because it has changed so much that it's almost unrecognizable. And the number 6 is the same thing with economics. We don't understand economics. Most people are not taught economics. We're not taught how money works. We're not taught what are the actual factors that change economics as it gets down to the person who's going to the grocery store to, to try to put groceries on the table for their family. We have no concept of how they're all connected, how it's all connected. And so therefore somebody can say something like, oh, I'm going to create an opportunity economy. Well, what the heck is that? What does that even mean?
Yeah.
And is that actually even in any way connected with what will really move the needle? So that might be more than you were looking for, but that's what I see as to why we're accepting this and why are we here and why are people thinking that. I had some people on my feeds like, wow, that was a great debate. I was like, really? What was great? What was great about it? But these are the reasons why.
Yeah, no, that's very thoughtful. And that's why you're here. That's why you are the Train Your Brain podcast host. Yeah, it's like, first of all, what you said, we call that an echo chamber when the algorithm feeds you things that you want to see, that you want to hear, confirms your biases. And then you're like, I'm right. Why do I need to fact check anything? This is all of these things that I've been seeing only confirm what I believe. That's dangerous. And then, like you said, not understanding how our government works or how economics work, we will hear things that those who understand worldview like Marxism can say, that's a Marxist worldview.
Yes.
That comes from an ideology that it has detrimental effects, and you can recognize that through the terminology. Yet if we don't understand how things work, then we'll be like, that sounds like a great idea.
Yep.
Let's go ahead and regulate prices on food, not realizing that that's been tried and has failed and has caused famines and everything else. So
Yes.
yeah, we have to dig deeper, and we have to be, it's laziness, because I always think of it, it started with the microwave, right? It's like, man, 30 seconds and I can have my dinner. I mean, who doesn't want that? And now we've turned everything into that microwave dinner type culture. Like, if I can get this fast at my fingertips and I don't have to think about it, it just makes life easier. But as a
Yes.
result, we have lost our ability to raise the expectation and say, I demand more of you if you want my vote. And it's just unfortunate, but those are great points. So now what we're going to do is something, actually, I haven't tried this yet on YouTube, but we're going to look at some things, and I want to walk you through this video of Kamala Harris and I believe it was 5 days ago. This interview took place on ABC 6, and she was asked a question. So I want you to watch this with me, and just we'll look at her answer, and then we'll go ahead and see what we think through that. Okay.
Madam Vice President, pleasure to meet you. Thanks for your time. Our audience appreciate your time. Of course. As you know, we're sitting here in the state and arguing in front of an audience that 54 days from now could decide the outcome of this presidential election. You hear it more than I do. People want to know more about you and about your specific plans. At the debate the other night, you talked about creating an opportunity economy. What if we could drill down on that a little bit? When we talk about bringing down prices and making life more affordable for people, what are one or two specific things you have in mind for that?
Well, I'll start with this. I grew up a middle class kid. My mother raised my sister and me. She worked very hard. She was able to finally save up enough money to buy our first house when I was a teenager. I grew up in a community of hardworking people, construction workers and nurses and teachers. And I try to explain this to some people who may not have had the same experience. If a lot of people will relate to this. I grew up in a neighborhood of folks who were very proud of their lawn.
Okay, we're just gonna stop it because she doesn't say much of anything else after that. So what do we say? He asked her a question about creating an opportunity economy, and she goes off on the middle class neighborhood and lawns.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's a lot happening here. And I did watch the whole thing too. So to have the full context of it. So what she's doing here has a name. There's a couple names for it. And it's actually very common in politics where they will do something. It's a fallacy. It's called the plainclothes fallacy or the everyday man fallacy, where they work to present themselves in a certain way in order to relate, in order to create an emotional attachment with the audience and with the listeners. And so by starting off saying, I grew up in a middle class, we had nice lawns, whatever it was, right? The whole thing was, I am a common person, right? I am a common person, just like the rest of you. I get how you are. I know how you are. And what that does is for the listener, it brings the walls down. So now the hope is that the listener say, oh, she's one of us. So she understands us. So whatever she says after this is going to be great, because it would be like my next door neighbor offering to fix a solution. It's a fallacy. It has a name. It's called the plainclothes or the common folks fallacy, depending on where you hear it from. And it's designed to lower your defenses and get you to take whatever they want, right? We've seen pictures of this before of Obama golfing and Trump with his grandkids. And there was even one, I think, of Bill Clinton going to McDonald's, right? They're just like the rest of us,
Right.
is the whole idea. And telling an emotionally sweet story, but that doesn't give us policy, right? That doesn't actually answer a question. And so we have to recognize what it is. And then she goes into her opportunity economy. But what does that even mean, right? Saying, I'm going to create opportunity. Again, it's nice sounding words. Oh, opportunity. I want opportunity. But there's no understanding of economics and how it actually fits and how the economy actually works, right? That explanation isn't there. And it's all very surface level, as most of these interviews are. And I mean, really think about it. It's like a 10-minute interview. How deep can anybody really get in it? But for us as the American people, we have to stop and say, okay, what does that mean? What is she saying here? How would that actually work? How does this play out? Would that actually solve the problem? What is the problem, right? It puts all the work on us. And that's the thing that we have to realize, is that where does it leave us? Where does all of this leave us as the general public? Well, it leaves us with the responsibility to have to think for ourselves, to have to dig in and do the work that, yeah, it would be great if they could make it a lot clearer for us. But when you realize these things are going on, when there's this word salad, right, it's another fallacy where somebody just says a whole lot of stuff. Maybe it sounds good, maybe it doesn't. But if you actually stop and say, okay, wait, what did they just say? You realize they didn't really say anything. They said a lot of words, but there was no no substance to it. And it didn't really answer the right question. You can say nice buzzwords like opportunity or opportunity economy. That sounds nice, right? That sounds really good. But what does it actually mean? Is it feasible? Is it something she actually has the power to deliver on? Those are questions that we have to ask and answer.
I want to create the Etch-a-Sketch fallacy. Those little, they're trying to move the knobs and it's going every which direction but the direction you want it to go. And you're like, come on,
Oh,
show me a picture. Show me something here. That's what it reminds me of. The Etch-a-Sketch
yeah.
fallacy. It's just going,
Yep.
zzz, and all the lines are going every which way and you can't make heads or tails of it.
That's awesome.
I'm
Yeah,
like, yeah, can we do that? Can we work on that? Like
we
maybe
can.
the fallacy detective. We got one for you. The Etch-a-Sketch fallacy.
Well, I came up with another new one. I had a new one on that Instagram post that some guy came on and said, well, Taylor Swift is voting for Kamala Harris and all the Swifties are. So she's got my vote as well. And I was like, oh, we have an appeal to Taylor Swift, appeal to Swifties. I need to put that out as a new fallacy. It's
I've never,
fantastic.
I wasn't expecting it from a guy. Now I know that there
Uh-huh.
are male Taylor
Yeah.
Swifties, I guess, but ugh, that's
Yeah.
terrible.
It was
It's
funny.
as bad as I'm voting for her because she's a woman.
Oh, that was one of the other
She's a
ones.
black woman.
It's special pleading. That is a special pleading fallacy. I'm voting for her for this special reasons because it's some special little unique niche people group. But why? Who cares? Who cares about that? What, like, that
That's
doesn't
the
help.
reason.
It doesn't help at all in this position. What are the things that actually make somebody fit for the job, make somebody fit for the position? Yes.
Yeah, I love that you
100%.
said that because everybody who says I'm going to vote for her because she would be the first black female or first female president, whatever you want to say, special pleading. There you go. It's
Yep.
another fallacy. So good,
Yep.
good job with that. All right, so I'm going to show you a couple more. You sent these in, and I
Yep.
love this. This is one here. Can you see that one with the Gotham?
The bottom part is cut out. There you go. There you go. So here's
Okay.
a few, because here's the thing, guys. Both sides do it because both sides have people, right? People have tendencies to think bad. Where you've got a brain, there is the potential for bad thinking. And so I wanted to point this one out.
Wait,
It's
hold on
right-
one second. One second, Kathy. For those of you
Yeah.
that are listening, it's Kamala Harris with a white face and green hair and a big red lipstick like the Joker. And it says Gotham has a new villain, the Giggler. So I know the people who listening wouldn't hear that.
Right. So what all this is obviously somebody who knows who on the right side is making fun of her laugh, right? And all it is an ad hominem. That's where you take something about the person and you make fun of that rather than attacking the person's arguments or rather than talking about their policies or the things that they actually think. So this is a great example of an ad hominem attack that gets passed around where they pick something, okay, she has an annoying laugh, whatever. And yeah, it happens on both sides.
Yeah, and I hear a lot of, like I was telling you before we recorded, I do hear a lot of ad hominems that come out of Trump's
Yes.
mouth. He labels his candidates, like right now it's Comrade Kamala. He labeled Hillary Clinton as Crooked Hillary, and that kind of became the branded name
Yep.
for her throughout that entire campaign. And so he looks at what can I attach to them that makes people identify in a negative way. And he, even during the debate with Kamala, he was like, she's a communist. And I don't disagree with the fact that whether or not her father was a communist, I haven't checked into that, but a lot of her policies do come from more of a communist, worldview. And I've talked about that before. So he didn't explain himself. He didn't give any context to that. He's just kind of throwing it out there. And people who they won't understand it, especially like you said, if they don't know government and they don't know the economics, they're not going to understand what he's saying because he did not give any context to that. He's not debating properly, like as you said. So
yeah, no, he is a notorious name caller for sure, which are all ad hominems and does not help. It just makes you look ridiculous. Like, stop. Let's actually argue the points and the facts. We don't need this. It doesn't help.
Right. Exactly. It just muddies up the conversation.
Yes.
Okay. So this one here says, can you see that? It
Yes.
says shots were fired at 6:11. Check out Ephesians 6:11. Put on the full armor of God so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. I know this was during Trump's first assassination attempt. I can't stand these. These are like these are my pet peeves. I when Christians, and I'm like, come on, guys. But anyways, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yep. So this one, as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, come on. So what we would call this is kind of a combination of several different fallacies. The divine fallacy. This is where somebody's coming in and they're ascribing divinity, divine interference, right? Which we could argue, okay, did God protect President Trump? Maybe, right? I don't know. I'm not speaking for God on this, right? But it combines that with the cherry picking fallacy where you just pick and choose whatever little pieces of something fit your narrative and fit what you're trying to say. Because, okay, check out Ephesians 6:11. Shots were fired at 6:11. Well, in one time zone, it was 6:11. In another time zone, it was 5:11. In another time zone, it was 4:11, right? Okay. So we cherry picked the time. And then we cherry picked the book of the Bible, because if you go to Judges 6:11, it's very different. Or how about Leviticus 6:11? Like, we could have picked just about any other book of the Bible that has 6 chapters and found a 6:11. And some of them, I looked at some of them, and some of them would be like, have the exact opposite effect like on the whole situation. So I was like, stop. No, stop. This is embarrassing.
Yes, no, that's very good points. I love what you said. Even thinking through it, just thinking through what time zone? Because if it was at 6:11 on the East Coast, it wasn't 6:11 on the West Coast. So,
Right.
you know, excellent. Okay, so
Yeah.
we have one more here that you had sent in. Can you see that one?
Yep. So
Okay,
this one, yeah, go ahead. Or you were
let me
going to
explain
explain
it
it.
really quick for
Yeah.
the listeners. So it's has the faces of four people. It's obviously the colors of even the Obama campaign at the time, but it has Obama's face. It says hope. Trump's face. It says hate, and then of course the letters are in red. And then it has Biden's face that says heal, and Kamala's that says grow.
So this is classic propaganda is what this is. So they're using images, they're using colors, even the face. So they picked this peaceful, hopeful looking face for everybody except for Trump. They've got, an angry looking face for him. It's all in red where the others have blue, all this stuff. This is a classic piece of propaganda of using visual images. It's using something called transfer. There's several different things, propaganda tactics at play here. The words, the images, all of it is designed for propaganda, and we have to be aware of this. We have to be aware when you start to see things. Another way that propaganda has happened with the news media is if you start to see or hear things, very specific words repeated over and over again, there's propaganda at play. So for instance, when President Trump picked JD Vance, the word was weird. Weird, 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 weird. You started hearing weird everywhere. Well, that's propaganda at play, right? They're just trying to get words out to create a certain image of different things. And so this is a piece of that as well.
Mm. Yeah, that's good. And I see a lot of propaganda. I posted something about it this morning just with the woman who died after taking the abortion pill in Georgia, and all of the headlines is just a very emotional first
Yes.
woman who died after, because of the Dobbs decision, Roe, those kinds of things. And it's like we have to look past those headlines and really dig into the meat of it. Also, now we have to start looking at the sources of those articles, where they're coming out of, because those sources have been routinely pushing propagandistic information and stuff. So I think it's very important that people are able to see those characteristics of propaganda and know that it's a technique. It is
Yep.
strategically there to manipulate you, to get
Yep.
you to act without thinking.
Yep.
And it's a little bit different than Trump using an ad hominem, because he's not thinking in his mind, this is a fallacy. Should I, should not? He's really just not using, he's
Not
not
thinking.
using logic. He's not thinking.
Yes. Yes.
Whereas in propaganda, the creator of that is thinking. They're
Oh,
thinking of
it's
how to
yes.
manipulate you.
Yeah.
It's almost, to me, it's almost like, when a criminal proverb says they think about and plan their way of how they can, evil people, how they can do wickedness. And
Right.
it reminds me of dealers and card players. They know their hands, and they want to guess what your hand is too. And they want to manipulate those cards. So there is some intellect behind that,
Yep.
the propaganda. So it's
Oh,
very
yeah.
clever. And that's why even the Bible describes Satan as cunning and crafty. They're not foolish. They know what they're doing. And that's the art of propaganda and
It
propaganda
is. Yep.
techniques. So when we watch the news, or well, we did show the one on Kamala, do you have anything else that you have seen or noticed? Because when we watch the news and we're looking at these articles in the newspaper and even social media, because a lot of people are getting their quote unquote news through social media, and I do follow a few people that are supposed to be like journalists, I guess, to some degree, and I don't trust their first, when they put something out, I go to a source I trust and see if
Yep.
they're talking about it. And usually if it's something outrageous, they're not. So even the cats and dogs things, I didn't plan on talking to you about this, but for me, that's going to come out eventually, whether or not it's true or not. What we do know is that the migrant population, or the illegal, actually they're not illegal. They're here because the U.S. government have given them the permission to be here, but they've been shipped to Springfield, Ohio. So they are there legally. I don't want to say illegal, but the migrant population there is inundating that town. That's the real issue that needs to
Right.
be focused on. Whether or not it's cats and dogs being eaten, I don't know. There is a cultural truth to that would have to be played out. So
Yeah.
when people see these things, my question is, what do we do? How do we think through them?
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic question because you're absolutely right. There have been some that have, as it's played out, been proven to be true. There have been some that, as it's played out, have been proven to be false. There have been some that I feel like we're still waiting on. How are we supposed to know? Like to your point, how are we supposed to know? So I think we have to come to it with a couple things. So I think we have to come to it, number one, with wisdom to know that it could be true or it could be false. And here's what I mean. And we see this play out with narratives as well. If you stop and ask yourself, okay, have I ever seen the quote unquote the other side, right? If you're a Democrat, it would be the Republicans, or if you're a Republican, it'd be the Democrats. Have I ever seen them misrepresent my position or misrepresent me as a person or misrepresent what I think or I believe about something? Totally get it wrong, but they think they have it right. Yes, we could all say, yes, we've seen that. So then we have to ask, well, is it possible that that's happening to me? Is it possible that there's something about their position that I don't have quite right, or that is being sold to me in a particular way? And I think fairly, we would have to say, yes, I think that's possible that we could be being told something that is misrepresented or is not truly accurate based on what they think and believe. And so, therefore, am I willing to do the work to find out what the truth really is? And again, this brings us back to this is exhausting. This is exhausting to do because we already have very busy lives. We already have very noisy lives. We're already hearing and seeing so much to have to stop and take the time and really either have a conversation with somebody or dig in or find, like you said, go and actually find a newsworthy website or somebody who's talking about this that we can trust. Like, it's hard and it takes time. And most people don't have the willingness to do like you do and say, oh, let me just go check this out someplace else and see if this is actually real or if this is really happening. Number two is curiosity. Most people do not have the curiosity to say, let me dig into this a little bit, or let me hold space for these two ideas and have the patience to wait to discover the truth. And if we can always hold that as our standard, if we have, this is the analogy that I always give, critical thinking is not the end of itself. Critical thinking is a tool to use when you have two divergent ideas or thoughts. The whole goal is to press up toward truth, is to buckle toward truth. And so most people cannot intellectually hold two things. Like you said, well, this might be true. This might not be true. There is this issue, but we're not sure about this. And we have to wait and see, right? Is what you said. Most people can't wait and see. They can't say, I'm not sure. I'm curious. I'm willing to go look and I'm willing to wait. I'm willing to withhold my judgment until I can wait and find out whether it's true or not, because it'll come out eventually. It will come out. But most people make up a snap decision because they heard it or they saw it somewhere, and then they have a busy life. So they move on and it never gets revisited. And now we just continue on in the bias that we had before. And so I think if we can just hold things with an open perspective, anytime we hear something sensational in the news, if we can just say, maybe let's see what comes out about that. I think that's some wisdom right there. Just that little sentence. Let's see what else comes out about this is going to help us be able to think more rightly and hold space and be open to just getting some more information about it.
I think that speaks to what you said a little bit ago when you have things coming at you quickly and it makes it easy for, you to get your information and not have to go dig. We move on from it so quick because the news is moving fast and my brain's not keeping up with what happened yesterday. And so people are trained and disciplined. I think that's not just a training. I think that's a discipline, and
Yeah.
disciplines are formed over time. So there is some training to a discipline, obviously, but we've lost our lack of discipline in being patient with learning. I bring this back, you're thinking of it from the student perspective of thinking through something. I'm looking at it from a student perspective of also learning something. And you have to learn how to think critically, but there's patience in learning. You have to be willing to put in the work of, because learning something isn't easy. One of my pastor said a few months ago, and I loved it because we were talking about Ecclesiastes. He said, wisdom is something you have to work for. It doesn't come naturally. And when he said that, I loved that because I'm like, that is so true. And a lot of times people think, oh, well, I have this wisdom because I heard this thing and I got the knowledge from it. Knowledge is the foundation of wisdom. It is not wisdom because what you do with that knowledge the next step in that is understanding. There has to be meaning to it. There has to be interpretation of it in order to apply it. And application is the wisdom of it. And so to me, has to be a patience with thinking through something and thinking well and being able to say, I don't know yet. I have to process that. Like, give me some time to think on it. I am a processor. I can't always just come up with it quickly. You got to give me some time to think about it. Like, if I'm going to do a podcast interview with somebody and they're like, this is the topic. Okay, let me think through it. And I
Yeah.
think that is also biblical. The Bible tells us to be slow to speak because we need to make sure we're thinking through something and mulling it over. And the phone, the social media, that is not the nature of it. It's not the nature to spur on pausing and thinking. I was thinking this morning, I was driving back from dropping my son off and I'm going to be speaking on just Titus in a couple of weeks. And last night I was reading it and this morning I was thinking on it and I was mulling it over and thinking about the whole purpose of Titus. Well, as I'm doing it, things start clicking and making sense. And I'm like, gosh, the Lord is right in the word where it says, meditate on the word. That is the processing of the word. It's processing the truth of God's word and letting it click and come together in your mind. So you can say, oh, I get it now. It makes sense. I read it, but now I'm thinking on it. And as you do, the Lord is helping you marinate through that. The Holy Spirit is letting it sink in. And that's how we were built to process information. And so I think that goes along, like I said, with your point. The nature of social media and the news is quick, 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 and move on so you can trust me for the next piece. And we have to learn the discipline of thinking and learning.
Yes, 100%. And we have just to go back with where you started this whole episode with, we have to love truth, right? Are we as a society a people who love truth, or do we love sensationalism? Do we love feeling our emotions? Do we love having somebody affirm us and affirm what we think, or do we love truth? And I think if we can come back to that and hold that as a standard, it answers a lot of these questions for us.
It does. Well, I love the conversation today. I love that we also evaluated some real things that people either might have seen or things that are related to some things that they might have seen. But either way, we still have a little less than 2 months now before we vote. And people, my encouragement to the listeners would be, do your work, do your homework, look at the policies, don't look at the personalities. I mean, I know it can get difficult to do that. I struggle with personalities on both sides.
Yep.
I really do. And I'm like, okay, Shanda, we got to look at policies here. That is what matters. And so, and they both have a record. Both of these, one of them's in the White House now. One of them was in the White House 4 years ago. So it's
Yep.
like, it's not like we don't have information. We have more than what we get with some candidates. So if we don't think through it and we're not investigating, then we're not really doing our jobs. And I think that's
Right.
irresponsible of us. You can say as an American, as a voter, I think it's irresponsible as a Christian. God doesn't call us to be foolish or ignorant of things. Christianity is an intellectual faith. It's knowing what you believe and why you believe it, and then being able to let that inform the decisions that we make, voting being one of those things. So
Yep.
I appreciate you being on today, Kathy. Your wisdom it blows me away. I love that you share it. And I love that it all started with just being a mom teaching your daughter. How
Yep.
awesome is that? It's just so inspirational for other parents.
Yep.
So with that, tell us where we can find you and listen to your wisdom every day if we want to.
Yeah. Yeah. So the podcast is called Filter It Through a Brain Cell. The website is filteritthroughbraincell.com. If you go there, I do have a free quiz that you can take. You can have your teenagers take. I love teaching through memes and headlines and the stuff that comes across my social media. So in my quiz, I've compiled 10 different memes or images or visuals, and you can test yourself and see if you can recognize the fallacy. I'm on Instagram, Filter It Through a Brain Cell. On Facebook, it's just Kathy Gibbens. You can find me there.
That's awesome. Well, thanks again for being here and working through all of this with us. I
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Shanda.
Yeah, thank you. And then for those of you that are listening, really, I encourage you to go subscribe to Kathy's newsletter. She's going to give you the tools in there to keep going with good thinking. A lot of people message me and are like, I really want to train your brain one day, or I want to learn how to think better, or sending me messages just asking me, what do you think about this and how do I think through it? I understand those things and that's great, but find out how to do that on a daily basis. Like get trained, start looking at, I just feel like the basics of logic is going to help you tremendously, even if you never go beyond that point. And so again, go listen to Kathy's podcast. This is what she does. This is what she talks about. I'll have all the links in the show notes for you, but if you don't want to wait to go look that up, filter it through a brain cell, it'll be in the description as well. And I'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, Shanda.